Hello, my name is Barbara Shoup. I'm the author of 8 novels, a memoir, and 3 books about the creative process. I'm also the writer-in-residence at the Indiana Writers Center, a nonprofit organization that offers classes and programs for writers working at all levels. For information about the center, visit www.indianawriters.org. Memory Workshop is presented for the Indianapolis Public Library's Adult Summer Reading Program. First, what's the difference between an autobiography and a memoir? An autobiography tells the story of a whole life from beginning to end. A memoir tells the story of a particular period of time in the writer's life, a turning point in the writer's life, or a thread that runs through the writer's life. It might be about 2 or all 3 of these things. In fact, often memoirs are. Memoirs read like novels with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They have tension and conflict, as well as a sense of resolution. The time or thread or turning point is thoroughly explored by the writer, and the reader emerges with an understanding of how it shaped the writer's life for better or worse. A good memoir is an act of discovery. All good writing is an act of discovery. In fact, good writers write to bring insight to their own lives as much as they write to share whatever it is that they know. Good memoirs come from something about the time or thread in the writer's life that the writer is still trying to understand. So you're telling the story of what happened, but bottom line, you're still trying to figure it all out. And that is what gives the energy underneath kind of what happens between the lines in a good memoir. That writer is wrestling with the ideas in his own life. A good memoir makes the reader feel that there was nobody else in the world who could possibly have written that particular book. Be aware that there are a lot of topics that people think will make good memoirs because they personally had such meaningful experiences themselves. Those things might include cancer, divorce, caretaking an elderly parent. It could be really survival of any kind of difficult situation, and also a joyful time of life too. It might be a childhood memoir, an early marriage memoir, whatever it is. It can be any of these kinds of things, and you come out of it and you think, oh, this affected me so profoundly. I want other people to know about this. They are good topics. They're fabulous topics. In fact, they're such good topics that there are already thousands and thousands of memoirs out there written about those topics. And so one thing you need to think about is how you can cast your experience as something different and absolutely new. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and free write some responses to these questions about the memoir that you want to write. Why do you want to tell this story? What period of time, turning point, and or thread in your life is your memoir about? Remember, it can be about more than one. Write down what you think will be the beginning, middle, and end of your memoir in a few sentences. What do you think is unique about your experience? What do you think readers who have read lots of memoirs on this topic will come away feeling with something really new and unusual about yours? What questions do you still have about this period of time in your life or the thread of things that happened to you? Do you think that there's any ways that those questions could ever be resolved? What might allow you to let go of these questions? If you're unfamiliar with free writing, it simply means free yourself of anything judgmental and just write. Write freely. Don't worry about grammar, punctuation, the right or wrong word, or organization. Don't worry about anything. You can always go back and fix these things. Writers revise. That's a part of the process. This will not be a finished product, this piece of free writing. So just write it, see what you get. Take as long as you need. You might even set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes, or just keep going until you feel like you're ready to stop. Okay, pause the video and write. So you have a strong sense of what you want your memoir to be, how you want it to feel. Where do you start? People often feel so overwhelmed by the idea of starting that they just give up It's an incredible thing, especially if you're thinking of writing a whole book. It just seems like a mountain to climb, and you don't even have the right shoes. So guess what? Number one, you don't have to start on page one and just keep going until you get to the end. That to me is a huge relief, because sometimes you start at the beginning and then you get stuck and you don't know how to do the next thing, but you feel like maybe you could do some of the things that are still coming. Do them. Do what you can. You do not have to start on page one and just keep going to the end. Don't forget that. This very simple exercise that I'm about to describe will help you discover, number one, which of your millions of memories will best tell the story about your life that you want to tell. And number two, just give you a lot of material, kind of like puzzle pieces that you can begin to put together when you get to the stage that you want to look at the thing chronologically. The material that will come of it now, and from doing it again and again as you go, will be the building blocks of the memoir you want to write. I strongly suggest that you pause the video and do the exercise now. The rest of the class will hinge on your understanding of this process. It shouldn't take you any more than maybe 20 minutes. So give it a try. I'll be here when you're finished. Here's the exercise. Write down, I remember, and then a phrase or sentence, no more, about the very first memory that comes to mind about the experience that you want to write your memoir about. Don't make any judgments, just let it come out, no matter what it is. Do this again and again. I remember, phrase or sentence. I remember, phrase or sentence. Do it for 3 to 5 minutes. Set a timer if you want to, without stopping. Write, don't type. Typing and writing are in different parts of your head. Writing brings it out better. So also remember, I remember, write, I remember each time. That part of your brain that this exercise likes, it likes the rhythm. So repeat it, even though it may seem silly. Write as fast as you can. Do not worry about spelling or punctuation or the order in which the memories come. They will be all over the place. And don't worry about the memories being silly or inconsequential or sad. Don't worry if they don't seem to fit. They probably will, one way or another. Just let yourself remember. Free range. Anything that comes up. You can't do this wrong. When you have finished doing that, I want you to choose one of the memories that floated up and do the I remember exercise again, focusing on that one memory so that you will begin to remember details about that memory. So if you chose, for example, something simple like, I remember my first day of school, then the exercise would take you to, I remember walking into the classroom. I remember what my teacher had on, or I remember that she had on a red dress. I remember the dollhouse. I remember nap time. I remember being afraid because I didn't know anybody. Whatever those memories are, just be specific about the memory that you've chosen to work with. When you finish that part, I want you to close your eyes, get the scene of the memory in your mind's eye. I know this sounds weird, but it works. Look up in your mind's eye, look down, look side to side, look up, and look behind you, and jot down any more details that might have come to you in that little process. And then I want you to free write for at least 15 minutes and more if you can. Just write that experience, get it down the best way you possibly can. Don't worry about the order. Don't worry about any of those kinds of things. Just try to get everything out. Use dialogue if you heard dialogue. If you get stuck, just stop for a second, get the picture in your mind's eye again, and that will usually get you going. You can also look at the list you made, and that will help you too. And don't worry, again, about the chronology. Take off writing about something completely different. New things may come up in the process that you didn't write down. That's fine too. You can use those. You really can't do this exercise wrong unless you let the part of your brain get in the way that wants to make it logical or orderly. It's not supposed to be logical or orderly. So if it doesn't work the first time, try it again. It will work eventually, and you'll get loads of stuff from it. Go for it. Stop the video and write. Here's why the exercise works. Repeating the phrase, I remember, keeps the flow of memories in the part of your brain where images live. It's not abstract. It's very, very specific and visual and sensory for that matter. If you look at your list of memories, you'll probably notice that many, if not all of them, have a visual, even cinematic quality. When you look or think of that memory, it's right there like a little picture in your head, and you can actually start the movie rolling, and you would see it unfold just as it did when you were living it the first time. If you skip that process, like I said, of repeating I remember, then you're just making a list, and your brain will shift to the part that wants to organize, analyze, and judge. And it's the wrong time for that. That is part of the creative process, but it comes at the end, really, when you're trying to really make sense of everything and make it all of a piece. It wants to bring order. Don't let it, because that really thwarts the flow. What people notice during this exercise, and I wish that we're all in the same classroom, because it's fun to hear people's responses to this. But generally speaking, what people get is they are often shocked by how easy it was to write in this exercise. It's like you feel like this stuff is pouring out, whereas usually when you're writing, you feel like you're having to write sentence by sentence and build it, and it's so agonizing. This is generally not agonizing. It's pretty easy and amazing. And when I watch people write like this, I love it, because they're all writing madly, and they'll stop and shake their hands because their hands hurt from writing. A lot of the time they're still writing when I say it's time to stop. You could kind of go forever with this stuff once you kind of get used to it. They're also shocked by how much they can write in 15 minutes. Sometimes people will get 2-3 pages, and how the feeling is such a relief. It's a feeling of outpouring rather than searching, and feeling just so frustrated. They are often surprised by what they write. I love this part. They'll remember things they hadn't thought about in years. Once I had a person remember something that changed her entire perception of how she remembered whatever it was she was writing about. It's an absolutely fascinating process. Sometimes they remember things that they had no memory of, that kind of make their way into the thing that they're writing. So it's fun. It's cool. I love that part of this exercise. You'll notice that associations led to other memories. You thought of one thing that made you think of something else, that made you think of something else, which may take you what feels like pretty far afield from the original memory, but there's something that made you think that way that is worth considering. They notice how sensory the memories are. What you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, what you smell, it's all there. People will come out and say, I was cold, I was writing about winter, or I smelled my grandmother's baking. And I think that's just wonderful. The details that people remember are visual and very specific. They're not abstract. Each memory is like a little scene, people say. You don't have to think it up. You don't have to make it up. It's right there. And all you have to do to get back to it is close your eyes, and there it is, right underneath your eyelids, and you can go again. There's often a sense of satisfaction, and in some cases even people come to a kind of sense of resolution in this process. They come to something they didn't really know that makes a real difference in how they see that one thing or that time. And you have a first draft, a little baby first draft, something that you could add to, subtract to, refine, and turn into a wonderful piece of writing. Like I said before, all writing is revision. The best writers revise, and the best writers revise more than anybody else. And they actually learn to love that process. Most of them do. In fact, every single memory you came up with in this exercise, in fact, is like a little first draft. It is a little first draft, because even though it's a phrase or a sentence, what comes with it, which is the whole scene in your mind's eye, is just waiting there for you to write it down. So you can use this exercise, fleshing out the one sentence phrase things that you put down into short pieces, turn them into scenes, And these will be the building blocks of your memoir. You can do that. I remember part of it again and again, and you'll get different things. You won't get the same thing each time. So not only do you have the list of I remembers that you just made, but you could do the exercise again and get more. So it's an endless fount of inspiration and useful material. So I, do it again and again and again. And I do it all the time. You will love it. You will find that you'll never again say, I don't have anything to write about, because I have to do that, and you'll have however many you can come up with. They'll be right there waiting for you. Here's another exercise to try. You can pause the video again and do it now, or you can do that one later. It's a little less important to what we're doing now. I just call this exercise before and after. Make a list of the markers. I think of them as markers in your life. Things like birth, death, divorce, accidents, a diagnosis, a traumatic move, seeing your parents as people for the first time, things that caused a moment of tectonic shift in your life, the things about which you will often say in conversation before and after. Before I met my husband, after I met my husband. Before I had that accident, after I had that accident. Before we moved, after we moved. It could be as dramatic as a war, a death, but more likely there are smaller, more personal things. And sometimes things that other people might have experienced with you, but didn't necessarily affect them as profoundly or in the same ways as they affected you. What you want to write your memoir about will almost certainly be about one of these before and after times. It's so helpful to think of those things. And there are before and after moments within a memoir too, that if you look at the, from a memoir from the beginning to end, various things happen along the way that change things for the writer, so that, it's again, you're thinking before this, before that, it got worse after this, it got better after that. So these are very useful things to think about. They're useful in fiction too, interestingly, to find who your characters are and how their lives develop too. So choose one before and after from your own life. These times in our lives are rich in conflict, tension, and story. And that's one of the reasons why they're so valuable too. Like I said, choose one before and after. Brainstorm a list of memories about that time. Whatever comes into your mind is fine. You could even do the I remember exercise with it as a way of brainstorming for that matter. And then choose one of those things to work with and do the I remember exercise with it. For example, if you're thinking about divorce, I had a student once who said, I remember the red suitcase my dad gave me for coming to visit him. And for her, that was a sad memory, because it meant that she would now have to go visit him, as opposed to him being at home with her. So these kinds of small details like this are huge in the way that they convey, by showing rather than explaining, how things felt and what they meant during this period of time that really changed your life so much and made you a different person. Again, you can do this exercise over and over to build up a body of short pieces that you can then later develop for your memoir. About the actual writing process, which I should say right from the beginning, will probably take you a really long time. It's not something you can do in a few weeks, probably not even a few months. It may take a year. It may take more than that if you want to write a book. So don't set deadlines for yourself. Don't say I have to have it done by such and such a time. Let it unfold. Be disciplined, but realistic, I guess. Here are some things to think about as you approach the long process of writing your memoir. First of all, I know I've said this before, but it's really important. You don't have to write chronologically. Write whatever seems possible when you sit down to write. The more you write, the more of these short pieces you write, the more you will know what your book wants to be and which things need to be left out and which things need to go in. Let the bits and pieces pile up. Eventually, you'll begin to sense an order, which might be a a chronological order, or it might be a thematic order, or sometimes people use something that's not really an order at all, but it's more like a mosaic where you just, kind of put all those pieces together and let them resonate against each other rather than try to, do them in some sort of traditionally organized way. Remember always to write from the place in your brain where the pictures are. If you get stuck with your writing, if it feels flat, then go back to free writing. Do those I remember things. Ask yourself questions and answer them. Sometimes I'll say, what are you doing in this story? How did you get in this story? And let the person answer me. And boy, is it really interesting. And even in a memoir, you could say, Mom, why did you do that thing? And imagine her answering in a free write, and you will be amazed at the kind of stuff that you can dredge up doing that. Remember that you can't include everything. If you actually wanted to write a memoir that included every single thing that happened from the time, this period of time started until it came to some sort of resolution, you'd have a 8 million page book, and we really can't do that. So, there's the necessity to dramatize, condense, telescope, and focus, and, really make a decision about what goes in and what goes out. One thing I advise is to, finish this sentence. Here's the sentence. This is a story about what happens when. Finish that sentence, and you'll have the beginning, middle, and end of your memoir, and you'll also have the focus, so that whatever doesn't kind of come under that probably doesn't belong. So this is a story about what happens when I find out that my mother has Alzheimer's and I'm going to be her caretaker. So that story would go from the diagnosis through the resolution, either where you must put the mother in a place that is safe for her because you can no longer care for her, or you care for her until the end. Whatever your end is fine. But you'll notice about that sentence that it doesn't say this is a story about taking care of my mother. This says this is a story about what happened when. And when you say what happened, it's not abstract. It's a series of scenes, it's a series of pictures. And so use that as a kind of a structure or framework of, thinking about the various kinds of scenes that go into your memoir and why. What do they tell? If they're repetitive, take the best one, leave the other ones out. Lots of things to think about. This class cannot tell you all of them, but I'm hoping that it will get you started and get you thinking. Revision is writing. So plan to revise. The easiest way to think of revising is that there's a gap between the thing that's in your head and the thing that you're able to get on the page in words. It's natural to the process. Everybody feels it, no matter how wonderful a writer they are. They all have this feeling that what I wanted to write just didn't come out exactly the way I hoped. That's the gap. And so revision is about trying to make that gap as narrow as it can be. Criticism is about finding people who can help you see what that gap is, to help you see the difference between what's on the page and what's in your head. You can't do it yourself because when you're reading your own work, you bring what's in your head to what's in the page. So learn to think of criticism as a great gift. Good criticism is, wow, it's the best thing in the world, and it's probably not going to come from your mother or your best friend. You need to find people who can be honest with you and really help you become a better writer. For this reason, I think it's great for you to think about taking classes, maybe joining a writer's group, finding a writer's community, because that's what we do for each other. And the Writer Center helps you do that too. So no matter where you are, there will be people who want to write. Believe me, there are a lot of people who want to write. Find them and let them help you and help them. Read memoirs. You can't be a writer if you don't read. So read memoirs and study the ones that are like the one that you would like to write. You can learn a lot by reading reading a good memoir. See how it moves through time. See how the writer does transitions. See how the writer does dialogue. You read it more than once. I sometimes read things 4 or 5 times and highlight them. And after a while, I start to see how they work, which is pretty cool. Remember that you don't have to write a whole book if you don't want to. You can turn your memories into a collection of essays or personal narratives. And that's a wonderful thing to do as well. That way you don't really have to worry about this, overwhelmingly huge project that you feel compelled to finish. Just write what you feel like writing, let it pile up and see what you've got. There are some practical, ethical, and personal issues for memoirists to consider. First and foremost being the reliability of memory. Memory is not reliable. It really isn't. A little research on memory will bring up many really interesting, funny, and sometimes tragic instances where people remembered things, but they really didn't. Their memories were wrong. And then there's point of view, too, which is one of my favorite things in the world, because boy, does it ever mess people up. You think of a Thanksgiving dinner, for example, and all the people around the table, and one person might come away from that dinner thinking, God, it's so great to get family together. It was so wonderful. And I love all the traditional things we do. And then, another person might come away from that dinner and say, oh, thank God it's over. Every single year we do the same thing. And, nobody's lying. Even if they describe the details of that dinner, they probably wouldn't say the same things. And that is just something we all have to learn to deal with as human beings, but we really have to learn to deal with it as writers. So this is your point of view, the memoir that you are writing. Other people may not remember it the same way, which doesn't mean anybody's right or wrong. It just means be prepared for that. And acknowledge the fact that it is your memory. And that while it shaped you in a certain kind of way, it may not be the memory that other people have, and that's okay. Probably not a good idea to get into an argument about that. Fact versus truth is another thing to think about. Facts are facts. You could list them, but truth is not necessarily the same thing. This is a tough one to explain. I'm not even sure it can be explained, but just because something is factual, you can order facts, for example, in a certain way to create a certain effect. And that might mean that you leave out certain facts in order to create that effect. So while it may be factual, it doesn't tell the whole truth of a thing. Truth is often contradictory. It will say one thing, sometimes it's paradoxical, and then it'll say another. And all of those things can be true at the same time, which is really what makes life and writing interesting to me, but it's pretty frustrating for a lot of other people. So as a memoirist, you need to be aware of that, that facts and truth are not the same thing. And what you're going for really is the deeper truth of your experience. Facts, they're not that interesting, really. It's the truth that's interesting. Grace Paley, a wonderful writer, once said, after a story is told for the first time, it becomes fiction. And I think that's wonderful and true. I think of my husband's fish stories. First the fish was this big. By now, it's really a lot bigger. He's not lying, it's just memory does that to you. So that the stories we tell, the memories we tell really are stories. That evolve and change over time. And again, research shows this to be true, people who study memory. So that's important to remember, that what you're telling is a story. It's your story. What you can't remember, that's something to think about too, because there's a lot you won't be able to remember. One of the things I think foremost is dialogue. And nobody can remember exactly what was said, but you know what people would never say. So you can create dialogue that is based on your understanding of who people were, the kinds of things they say, the things that they would never say. A lot of people will use certain kinds of expressions all the time, and that says a lot about who they are. Sometimes I think it's funny, people, instead of using a a bad word, will say, oh, sugar. Well, you know what they mean. And it says something about them that they use that. And so, you can characterize them using the kind of dialogue that comes to a deeper truth, of kind of the way they talk. Some people talk in long sentences, some in short sentences. Some people use big words. Some people use little words. Some people don't say very much, but when they say it, it means something. So, think about that. As long as events feel true to the real person, honestly, you're honest in your depiction of them, that's okay. And honesty and objectivity are also, they're important. It's important to see as clearly as you possibly can, even things that might put you into a bad light, things that don't make you look so great, which sort of leads me to suggest that revenge is not a very good idea or motive for a memoir. People want sometimes to write a novel of revenge, but those novels generally aren't very interesting. What's interesting is if somebody has hurt you, to try to understand the dynamics, what happened and why. And if you do it that way, you'll come out with insight, that will change you. And that's a good thing. Put things down as well as you can and let the reader decide. Don't make judgments about people. Don't tell your reader what to think about this person or that place. Put the details down as well as you can. The joy of reading for all of us, no matter what we're reading, is this process of discovering. It's like the writer lays down clues for the reader, and the farther into the book you go, you say, I didn't know that. Now I think something different. So give the reader that pleasure. Think about who the audience is for your memoir. Is it just yourself? Are you writing to come to some understanding of your life, and that's all you care about? Are you writing for your family and friends? A lot of people, want to leave their stories. They want their friends and families to have their stories. Or are you writing maybe for people who you don't know, but who might have an interest in the topic that you're writing about? Those are three really different kinds of ways of thinking about where you think your writing is going to go once it leaves your pen or your computer or whatever. And one of the reasons why they're important is because it helps you decide what kind of level of craft that you want to try to achieve. You can write however you want. It doesn't matter. It's a personal thing. But if you want your writing to go beyond yourself, there's a certain level of craft, and really craft is all about clarity. It's not really anything more than that. You're trying to make what you write absolutely clear to the people who are reading it, so that they don't go away thinking something completely different from what you wanted them to think, because that's it. You're telling the story because you want it to be told, and you want people to understand it, and so you want to make sure they understand it. If you're writing only for yourself, craft, or this goal of clarifying, making things as clear as they can be, the harder you try to make writing clear, the more insight it will bring to you. So even if that writing never goes beyond you, it will still serve a better purpose if you make an attempt to make it clear. And that includes learning how to build a scene, what's in a scene, how to characterize people, how to make transitions from one time to another. All those things are craft, but they're really about clarity, about making sure that the reader comes away with what you want them to come away with. If you're writing for family and friends, clarifying avoids confusion and misunderstanding. You might give something to someone in your family to read, and they'll come away feeling hurt or angry or confused because they just don't get what you were trying to say. So be careful. Make sure that it is as clear as it can possibly be. You sometimes have the opportunity, if they tell you, to clarify for family and friends, but you don't always. So it's important. And if you're writing for publication, you hardly ever have the time to clarify. You don't get to stand over somebody's shoulder and tell them how to interpret what you've written, or that they're interpreting it wrong. So you absolutely have to have a professional level of craft to be able to get the attention of editors long enough to interest them in your process. So it's for you to decide what level of craft you want to achieve. Classes, writing groups, all kinds of resources are out there for you to use to help you become a better writer. I'll suggest this book too, Memory Workshop, which is a book published by the Writer Center, written by myself and another person, that gives you lots of interesting ways to come at writing and think about writing. There are lots of good books on craft that you can find. So go to the Writer Center website, www.indianawriters.com, and see what's there. If you'd like a copy of today's exercises and maybe a few more resources I could send you, you may email me at barbarashoup@indianawriters.org. I hope this class has been helpful to you. Good luck with your memoir. Keep at it. Don't stop. It's all about being disciplined and stubborn, really. You got to be stubborn. So do it. Write your memoir, and maybe I'll see you at a class at the Writer Center and get to read parts of it. Thanks for watching, and check out the other programs the library has on offer this summer. There's lots of good stuff.